So questions, comments, any thoughts that we can expand upon?
Okay, so like one of my big takeaways is I love FAQs and SAQ, frequently asked questions and should ask questions.
Right.
But you've given me another place to use them, and that's in the email marketing.
Yeah, so Karen noted that FAQs and SAQs, you love it, you love that, and I think the implication is putting that on the website is something that you're accustomed to doing, but putting them in the website, or excuse me, in your email marketing is essential. So what we find is that many businesses make the commitment to email marketing or social media or whatever, and then they have no clue what to do and what to write and why to write it. And they also suffer from, you could call it writer's block, you could call it writer's terror. I mean, it's hard for a lot of people to do. But one of the things that I note when I'm talking to somebody who is saying, I don't have the time, I don't know what to write, I don't know why to write it, I will say, come up with 3 FAQs that you hear from your clients. And they'll do it in a snap. And then I'll say, have you in the past month answered that FAQ, answered that question in an email to a prospect or a client? Has somebody asked you that question, you've sent an email? And invariably, they will say, yes, I have. I'll say, that's great. You have a rough draft for a blog post or a rough draft for an item that you can put in an email newsletter. You all have the expertise that you can share with your audience. If you don't have the expertise, you're probably in the wrong business. You all are experts at whatever it is you do. And you all are having conversations every day with prospects and clients. And in fact, you're having those conversations in writing. The concept that I'm presenting to you is just organize your thoughts around, okay, what are these questions that I'm answering? Write them down. And then you begin to realize that those conversations are happening all the time. Again, my blog or the columns, it is so common that I introduce them with, I was having a conversation with a prospect or a client the other day, telling a story about something somebody said. And what people will do at that point is say, oh yeah, that question's occurred to me as well. I was having that conversation with somebody else. And then I answer the question. There is a very finite set of topics that I discuss with my target audience. It's not a tiny list, but it's a finite list. And what I do is I constantly recycle those topics in my email newsletters and my blog, but I constantly frame them based on things that occur to me, things that I hear, and so forth. I'll probably find a way to write a blog post about, I heard a presentation by Josh Turner the other day. He said this. It echoes this, the point that I always try to make. And sorry, I know you're reaching for the mic, but it echoes one more point that I did not make earlier, and that is, don't be afraid to be a content curator, not just a content creator. Referencing somebody else's stuff is a quick and easy way to produce content. Karen the Connector is terrific at that. She's a social media person, and half of her posts, I don't know, some major percentage of her posts are, here's a great thing that somebody else wrote, here's why it's important. That's content curation, and it's a whole lot quicker and easier than content creation, but it's valuable. She's an expert, she's vetting the content, she's putting it in context, she's writing the little plaque that sits next to the masterpiece and telling you why you should view it. That's a great way to get the content done as well.
Just along the same lines of storytelling, using stories of clients that you've served can be far more impactful than just a theoretical how-to type presentation. So one of the webinars we did back in February was a 20-minute executive brief on what's working today for lead generation using LinkedIn. And I told a couple stories of campaigns we're running for our clients, showed some screenshots of things we're doing for them, showed the ROI and the results they've gotten, talked about their businesses and such. To this day, I'm on the phone with prospects who are referencing those stories, you know? And so, yeah, well, like the guy in Australia that you work with and da-da-da-da-da, and they just think like, oh, they see the reality of what it can be when you put it in the context of a real person, you know, and it sticks with them.
Yeah, one of the little boxes in my FAQ SAQ grid is all it says is personalization ? It's a question I get. How, should I be personalizing my emails? How, so forth. It's on the grid, and so when we devised a tactic for this event to use personalization, and it was successful, it immediately clicks in my head, I have a blog post, and actually it's my deadline today for next month's Small Business Monthly column. I already have something written that I thought I was going to use, but I'm going to go upstairs, and this afternoon, I'm going to write about that. I'm going to tell the story and explain how and why personalization can drive sales, and cite a very specific example of what we did instead of a lecture of, here are the 5 reasons that personalization matters. Storytelling. Yes?
I just read an article about using those lists of 5 ways to do this, 5 things to avoid, being one of the best ways to have your things reshared or engaged, which kind of is the opposite of what you're saying about the stories. Do you just disagree with that, or is there a way to work the two together and balance?
So she asked that she read an article about how putting content out there, 5 ways to do this, 5 ways to do that, is a great way to attract leads and draw people in. So I don't think the two concepts are in conflict. In fact, on our blog, when you visit our blog, on every single page on the right-hand side, it says, enter your email address to receive 10 secrets to write subject lines that sell. Okay? There aren't any stories in that. It's just 10 things. And it yields very well. We get lots and lots of leads from that. Then we begin to engage them, and it speaks to that idea that we draw them in by saying, here is the answer to a question that you have. How can I get more people to open my email? How do I write better subject lines? We draw them in with the quality of the product or the service, the ebook or the free report in that case. But in order to sell them and in order to retain them, we begin to deliver follow-up emails and drive them to the blog where it's more than just lists and lectures. So the two things work in combination.
Nothing to add to that.
I did it? I covered it? Excellent. What else?
Dale, you had a question?
Yeah, Tom, what other tools do you use to generate ideas for your stories?
Oh, wow. Can Josh answer that question too? Okay. What other ideas do we use to generate ideas for stories? So what I will do is I've built standard searches in Google, email marketing news, email marketing trends, interactive marketing, social media, and so forth. And in Google, you can save searches and ask that those searches be delivered to you as email digests, email summaries. So in my particular case, I get an inbox full of stuff that's going on related to my industry, and on a periodic basis using time blocking techniques that I've learned from Kathy Sexton, the productivity expert on the other side of the room. I set aside time to review those things, and I have my FAQ, SAQ, and objection grid that is pretty static. That list stays pretty still. So there's a question on there, personalization, and then I have another list where I'll write personalization, tell story of E for E, email. Using video, write about article I found and I have link. And so I build a list of ongoing content ideas by referencing things like that. Blog, you can do something called blogsearch.google.com, and it'll filter a Google search to just search blogs on a particular topic. There are all sorts of search engines that allow you to find things. But what I'll also do is pose questions on social media, pose questions and surveys to my clients and prospects, and say, what's on your mind? I'll go into the LinkedIn groups and see what conversations are occurring in social media in the industries I'm trying to reach. That's 4 ideas, I think. You have some, I'm sure.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, one thing I do is, in terms of blogging, we share the responsibility in the office. Everybody has to write something once a month, come up with a topic. It has to be approved. It can't be something off the wall. And so that's a good idea to get a lot of brain power behind it. More tactically, though, Quora is a great place to go to find questions people are asking.
What is it?
Quora, Quora. And I had one more. In terms of stories specifically, though, and not just blog ideas, I've found that in terms of stories to tell to prospects during the sales process, that I typically don't need more than a couple key stories to rely on in any given situation. And so I just look at the clients we're working for and what are the most recent stories that, obviously, position us in the best light and that people will relate to, and go with those on an ongoing basis.
Good, thank you.
Good question, thanks. Donald?
You mentioned a lot of targeting on Facebook and LinkedIn and Twitter. I was curious if you addressed Google advertising and targeting people on Google.
Sure, I can talk about that, specifically related to webinars. Yeah, so the question is, how does Google AdWords, pay-per-click, work within all this kind of stuff? And my experience has been that getting people to sign up for webinars specifically off of Google AdWords, Microsoft Ad Network, I forget what it's called. What's it called, Will? Ad Center? Bing Ads is very expensive, has been our experience. So we really invested for a couple months in saying, let's make a go at seeing if we can replicate the successes we've had with social advertising using Google, and spent $7,000 over 2 months for some internal marketing of our own webinars, and yielded terrible results, just awful. And so had to pull the plug on it. We invested enough to test it, and for what we're doing, that was the result. At the end of the day, though, 2.5 months later, we were able to tie back a very substantial client that we signed back to that campaign. So the short-term results from webinar registrations was really bad, but it turned out one of those people is now one of our highest paying clients. And so there's obviously something to be said for that, So I think it's something that you got to try for your own situation. Just like everything else, if you know your prospects are searching for what you do or what your webinar's about or what your white paper's about, it's certainly worth playing with it a little bit, seeing how it will work for you, and you might find that it's different. I talked to a company that's out of India, but their footprint is worldwide, a few weeks ago, and their primary sources of leads is Google and Facebook, about equally. and they're generating leads using Google AdWords, their display network, YouTube, pay-per-click, the whole thing, driving leads to webinars and to landing pages for opt-in offers. And it's working for them in their situation, you know? So it's almost a talk to Adam Kreitman type of thing, you know?
Or talk to Will Henke in the back, who Adam and Will are both members of the E4E Experts Network, and Will focuses primarily on organic search, SEO, website optimization, making sure your website is really well geared for the search engines to find your site. Adam is somebody who focuses on the paid search side a little bit more, and both are among the best around on the search thing. One thing I wanted to emphasize also is Josh and I both talked about working backwards. And one of the reasons that is so essential is if you don't have the end goal in mind, and if you don't understand how you close leads and how much a close is worth, not just how much the initial sales transaction is worth, but how much the lifetime value of the customer relationship is worth, then you're flying blind. He keeps talking about, is it working, is it working, is it working? Well, that's an equation. It boils down to numbers. It only works if your cost to acquire and then convert the lead is lower than the lifetime value of the customer relationship. At MarketVolt, we've calculated our cost to acquire a new customer. And there are all sorts of factors that go into that, from salaries to marketing activities to the cost of those grapes and those danishes out there. All of those costs add up, and we begin to do calculations that say how much money have we spent versus how many transactions and sales have we done. Our cost of sales varies, but it's typically a tick higher than the revenue on a first-year transaction with a MarketVolt client. And our revenue comes from licensing our email marketing software and then from consulting and paid services around that software. So why in the world would we say that's okay, that spend more than to get the transaction? Because ours is a recurring revenue model. When a client signs up to use our software, that client is not worth $600,000, $700,000, $800,000 or whatever the typical license for our software would be. That client is worth many thousands of dollars because 95% of our clients renew, and they renew for many, many years. So a $1,000 client in year one is ultimately worth somewhere between $5,000 and $10,000 for us over the life of the relationship. And we need to know that number so that we can know how much we're willing to spend. Is it worth $5 a lead to get them to a webinar, or is it not? Yes, Will?
I'm guilty of sending one newsletter out to everything to everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And you mentioned tagging.
Mm-hmm.
It's either tagging different people for jazz and for rock.
Mm-hmm.
Does that mean you're building one list and then sending segments out, or are you building different lists?
So he asked the question, you're tagging people based on interests or demographic or whatever the case may be. And he said, does that mean you're building one list or you're building multiple lists? I'll answer that first by saying in a way, list is a technical term that depends and varies in meaning according to the software that you're using. So in the case of MarketVolt software, you put all of your contacts into the database, and then you apply different tags. So Will Henke can be tagged as jazz lover, rock lover, and blues lover, and it's all one big data set with different tags applied. Now, when it comes time to send an email, one of the things that MarketVolt allows you to do is instead of having to send a separate email to jazz people and rock people and blues people, you can send it one time to one list, and the technology will vary the content according to how the people are tagged. So from my perspective, I think about it as one list, but in other systems it would be multiple lists. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I'll talk about, one way we do it that's pretty simple. This is probably, a basic thing to do to start segmenting your list. But after one of those Linked University webinars, and we'll typically have 500 to 1,000 people sign up for them every 2 weeks. Well, we don't have the manpower in my company to pick up the phone and call all those people after the fact and see if they would be interested in other programs we offer. And at the end of the day, like Tom talked about a lot, the closing higher level deals is going to happen on the phone, on a go-to meeting, Skype for us. So what we do after the webinar is that we start dripping out content, white papers, charts that are overviews of our process, and then the people that click on certain things then get other emails. All right? And then at the end of about a 3-week campaign, we can kind of, loose way score those leads so that the people that have really clicked a lot of that stuff are going to be queued up for a phone call because they seem highly interested. So we're able to weed the 1,000 people down to the 20 that we need to pick up the phone and call. And then in the meantime, over the last 4 weeks since the webinar, we've taken some time for them to get to know us a little more, and they're more comfortable and familiar. And so I look at it as better than just calling them all the day after the webinar anyways, because sometimes that seems like a little overeager and pushy to people. So that's one way we're doing it.
I think it's time for a story.
All right.
We have a client who is in the shipping and logistics business, international shipping. And his business is sort of a front end for DHL, which specializes in international shipping. And they take care of getting all the paperwork done, making sure you have all the government stuff lined up and so forth. So we thought, and he thought, that initially one of the ways to get in front of prospects for his business was to do some teleprospecting. So that's another example of what I was talking about, that lead generation, we've talked about LinkedIn and Google and so forth, but many times good old-fashioned 20th century marketing, teleprospecting, direct mail can still work if done properly. But done in conjunction with interactivity is the key. So we built a script for this teleprospecting where the primary call to action was, will you take an appointment with Ron so he can come over and show you how you can save on your international shipping? And out of something like 600 calls, he got 10 appointments, something like that, which is not a terrible conversion rate on a teleprospecting campaign. And he converts meetings at better than a 50% clip. So he built some business off the teleprospecting. But what we also did is we said, could we have your email and send you a free report, 10 things that you must do or 9 things that you must do before you select an international shipping service, or 9 questions to ask when selecting. I forget exactly what it was. And out of 600 people, I think 90 took the report. 90 said, fine. And keep in mind, when you do a teleprospecting campaign out of 600 people, a large number of those people don't pick up the phone or don't return the call, or it goes to voicemail. So they got 90 opt-ins. Then what we did is send a series of follow-up emails, including the initial one that says, here's that report we promised, and we began to track who downloaded the report, who opened or didn't open the email, and we qualified them at different levels. The people who opened the first email and downloaded the report were obviously highly qualified compared to those who just opened, compared to those who didn't open. We had a second and third email, so we were kind of building a list. And then Ron himself picked up the phone and did follow-up telephone calls with those who were in the first 2 or 3 tiers of qualified prospects. And I think it was 30 phone calls he made or 25 phone calls. And of those 30 or 25 phone calls, he got 10 appointments. So those phone calls took him less than 2 hours, and he got 10 appointments. Now, he wouldn't have gotten those leads if not for the teleprospecting. So that investment was worth it. But he doubled the yield of a teleprospecting campaign by qualifying with a follow-up email campaign. Good story, huh? Yeah.
I'm going to tell everybody about that. That's good.
Yeah. What else?
Another comment about something that's a takeaway for me is
Mhm.
the whole webinar feels overwhelming, and to do a 20-minute brief feels like, oh, well, anybody can do a 20-minute brief.
Yeah.
So thank you for that.
Yeah, and I will offer a call to action. So I have violated the suggestion that Josh had, and in part because we're just on the verge of being ready to do this, but at MarketVolt, we are about to launch a new webinar campaign called the 5 and 25 webinar series. And I will bow to Josh, noting that this notion of that under 30-minute webinar is an idea that Josh helped me nurture and helped me come to. The number 5in25.com is the website, and that's not really ready. It's kind of half designed. But you'll see a link to an upcoming webinar, which is 5 ways that B2B companies use email marketing to grow their business. And very quick, 5 quick examples, 5 quick tips. We're going to do series for 5 and 25 for nonprofits, 5 and 25 for specific industries. So Karen, I would agree with you that this idea of doing the shorter webinars is good, but I would also echo, and Josh should be the one who's really talking about this, that there is a role and a reason for the longer webinars, and that it is harder to fit in that sale, and to, especially if you're trying to pitch a big ticket item at the end of a webinar. The hour-long thing matters.
Yeah. Yeah, and the conversation I talked to about when I first got up here with that CMO of the Fortune 500 insurance company, he said flat out, when I talked about, we start getting into the details of what your webinar is going to be like, it can't be more than a half hour, and that's their experience, that has to be, it can't be longer than that because the kind of people they're targeting will not sit around for more than that if they're lucky, and they use it, of course, as a selling tool as well. So in your marketing, be sure to let people know this is only going to take 20 minutes of your time. And then people will think, okay, well, I can deal with that. Maybe eat my sandwich while I'm watching, whatever it is.
Yep. Last question. We're pretty much, yeah, we're right there. Anything else? Any other comments or questions? So one more piece of business is